Awesome. So something that's like I was asking Kevin for marital advice, and he quoted Acts at me, and then that I responded back that like, oh, that actually means tons, because that's my favorite book that I've read so far in the Bible, and I've always kind of wondered why Acts was so fascinating to me, and then I realized that it's because it's, in my mind, it's less about well, let me just, I guess, so I listened to the Gospels, and then we got to Luke, and then Acts started, and I didn't realize Acts had started, and I loved it because it was just effectively just a story that I just thought it was a really long gospel, and with a chronology at the end, and then I gotten all the way through it, and then I forget what the next which of Paul's letters is after that, but I didn't even realize I'd listened to it, and then I read into it, and it was fascinating to me that it was a chronology, and so that's part one. Part two was what I've always loved about Catholicism. What caused me to dive in was how it apostolic succession, and how it's the only real connection straight to the very beginning. And I think the best embodiment of that is what is described in Acts. And then I was listening to a podcast a couple of weeks ago where Jimmy Akin mentioned randomly that all of the that a side project of his was going through the book of Acts, and like when they said that a trip took 2 days or a trip took 2 weeks, it actually like he went on there's like a digital map service, and it actually is a 2-day walk or a 2-week trip or something or other. And so anyway, it was just fascinating me because it's through those contemporary, just like little things like that. And then right when he starts saying we, as opposed to describing what's happening elsewhere, it really correlates when he logically could have been hanging out with Paul in Rome. It was fascinating to me. And so I was diving into it, and it is it strikes me as true history. And when you view it as true history, and you look at that, how unique it is in that function, it makes you, okay, well, that's also just part two of what Luke was writing. And then if you get from that, the rest of the Gospels kind of, you can view as that history as well. So I thought that was fascinating. And it's always been a very scary, scary book. And just the idea that something as grave as the crucifixion and them feeling like as though they were defeated, and how there was the 11 of them, and then 70 people on that like first night afterwards. You got to correct me, you're the scholar. Was that and then like a day later there's 3,000 Christians, and then Jesus comes back, and then they're like, they spend that time was it 40 days they spent with him? Was that right? And then they're turned into super Christians and go as far out as Pakistan and India and all over the Mediterranean. And so anywho, I've always thought that was both inspiring and scary at the same time. And I was just, I guess what I wanted to lead in discussion was like what might have been going through their minds, and what I know there was no real risk of failure because it couldn't have failed, but with that much weight, and how much I'm not describing this well. How scary that must have been, and under how much pressure, and then to actually still go out and found 1,000 churches and convert 1 million Gentiles and Jews in a very, very short amount of time, to where, so what's the guy's name? Suetonius, barely 20 years later, is describing about how they're effectively going to have to evict all the Jews from Rome because they're bickering so much about what's happening. And anyway, so going back, and this is the end of it, and I just wanted, I could turn this into a discussion about Acts and how it's a historical document, is how Acts demonstrates I'm not doing this right. Can we stop recording?
Done good, Reed.
And yeah, it's
You mean done with the historicity of?
Yeah, about how we have a historical document. We've got a Christianity spreading so far in 20 years time, and it
without weapons.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was going to bring that up. Thank you.
Without an army.
And I can think of one other example of that happening would be Islam, but that was
Well, they spread with an army.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. Like it was maybe the same amount of people conquering the peninsula, the Arabian Peninsula, and that's how they did it. Whereas this was just you've got two really entrenched current belief systems. You've got the Jewish world and the Roman world, and you have that much happening all within a 20-30 year time span, and it is it's impressive, but also had to have been so terrifying at the beginning, but then maybe not terrifying, just because Jesus did come and hang out and give the Great Commission, and they just took that. And how would we, has that dissipated over the years? Could 11 and a half or whatever, who is the 12th?
Matthias.
Matthias and Paul, effectively, just with that crew, could those same people do something like that today? And of course they couldn't. And so,
well, yeah, that begs that's a good discussion question. Why not? There's 12 apostles who were the followers of a convicted criminal, executed in the most disgraceful manner that society could think of, and without any electricity, cars, horses, even probably having to pay. No, they gave up their sources of income, so they relied upon the goodwill of other people to get them from one place to another in 1 or 2 days or 1 or 2 weeks. And without the use of microphones, cell phones, TVs, cameras, recording devices, even written books at the time proclaimed a new religion that convinced people to believe.
Yeah. And it was so, and I'll try to keep it
in opposition to an imperial government that wanted them dead, and a Jewish community that thought they were heretics who were blasphemers.
And go ahead. Sorry, I'm not going to interrupt somebody that's saving me.
There was an apostolic zeal, but they say the same gifts are given to us today, right? We're not given the gifts of the Spirit in order to be apostles, but we are given the gifts of the same Spirit. Confirmation constantly refers back to Pentecost and the gifts of the Holy Spirit. So yeah, it is quite amazing. It might even be proof, historically speaking, of divine intervention, that there's no other explanation that this movement should have succeeded when and where it did.
Exactly. And that You're a much better speaker than me. And
More practice.
I've been listening to podcasts specifically on Acts all week, and just the fact that somebody. So I know there's a lot of theories about how Luke got written and what the how that happened and who it was addressed to and all, but what's the widespread accepted Catholic belief that like is the what's the
Theophilus?
Yeah, is that his benefactor, or is that just the Christian world, or the
I think it's yeah, the latter, the second. Like it's
but he was clearly like
the lover of God.
yeah, and so there's a couple. I was listening to that people that had two different opinions on it, but either way, it was what Luke had to do in the research and how traveling around had to take a ton of money, and so what prompted that big of a capital outlay? There clearly had to be such a fire throughout the Mediterranean and to even warrant him doing that investigative mission there. And the fact that it cuts off so hard and abruptly right around AD 60, shows that it had to be that widespread, and that many millions of people had already at least been heard about it, that it's prompting an investigative fact-finding mission, to go around and interview the apostles, potentially even interview Mary. And it's just mind-boggling to me, and I can't think of another historical event that has that much it's definitely not fiction, it's not
Yeah, you know what, the question is, how would you get that kind of attention today? Right? So if you're some little schmuck fisherman from the Sea of Galilee in the podunk outlands of the Roman Empire, which the apostles were, right? How do you get attention of the Roman Caesar? How would you get the attention of Joe Biden today? You personally.
Yeah.
Without threatening to assassinate him.
Yeah.
Right? Is there a way that you would come to the attention without committing a crime or threatening something? Or think of that. The apostles, historically speaking, it's such a unique event. Here's 12 fishermen and their followers, some who had money, some who didn't. And they come to the attention of all the leaders of all those petty little kingdoms, and then and the Roman Caesar and the Senate and a Roman historian.
Yeah. And hadn't there been something like a dozen false messiahs prior to that, and they just disappeared? Poof.
Well, right. Well, the quote, Messiah types that appeared prior to Jesus were all revolutionaries. They were, their focus was on rebelling against the conquering powers in order to restore the kingdom, which for over 500 years, they had lost their freedom.
So you can make the argument then that Islam almost proves Christianity. Well, the spread of Islam proves Christianity in the sense that, and I know this is a stretch, but that was the only way to have that kind of light switch new religion that gets started in the 600s and in the ancient world. But for a new and radical religion to be spread peacefully,
there is Lucifer, the devil, can disguise himself as an angel of light. It's my personal opinion that the founding of Islam is shot through with diabolic apparitions.
Oh, I wasn't saying that
It
was
wasn't-
God.
in
I'm
other
not saying
words,
Islam was God's plan or anything
Oh,
like
no,
that.
I know.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is it's not just merely human. It's not just merely human fighting and military conquests that the Muslims were successful. You know, they were good warriors, humanly speaking, okay, against their opponents. But I also think there's something diabolical behind the spread of Islam.
Of course, and I would, you could probably make the case that Muhammad probably was talking to somebody and receiving something, yeah, and because he wasn't completely uneducated, right? He was just kind of middle class.
He was illiterate though.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So yeah, that could
He was a
be.
merchant.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to sidetrack your thing, but that's interesting that you bring up. Do you know when he went, he was already 40 or so at the time, he goes up to, he goes up to the cave outside of Mecca, and he has an experience. If you read the Quran and you read the Hadiths, where he identifies it later as Jibril or Gabriel grabs him, squeezes him to the point he thinks he's going to die, and says, recite, you know, blah, blah, blah. He says, I can't. He goes down to his wife, Khadijah, and he thinks he's demon possessed. He thought it was a devil. He was convinced that he was either crazy, it was a devil grabbed a hold of him. It was his wife that convinced him. Now, you saw the angel. It was an angel, Gabriel. You're right. Several times, this is not controversial, several times Muhammad thought about jumping off a cliff to commit suicide. So he was mentally ill. Like, it's not even up for debate. See,
And didn't he admit also when there were contradictions and something that he'd say that I admit that I got fooled by a demon.
the
or something like
satanic
that.
verses.
Yeah.
And he would receive revelation, just recite, write this down. Apparently part of it, according to Aisha, he married the young girl Aisha. There's and it's weird, I don't want to go off, but it's weird, it's very sexual. There's perverse things in it, and there was a part of it that apparently that no one liked, so a goat ate it. A goat came in and ate those verses.
Really?
You can look that up. Yeah, there's a part about, I don't want to go into, I'm not going to go into what it was, but if you want to know, I can tell you. But it's just weird stuff like that. And like you said, then it's not only spread by force of arms, right from the beginning, because he goes to Medina, they're going to kill him. He comes back with an army. He's killing. It's right from the beginning. It's by force. And then this also is not up for debate. Like they lied to the Christians and lied to the Jews to try to get as many of those on. These are heretic Christians, because the heretics lived outside the Byzantine Empire in Arabia, and other Christians he came into contact with lied to them to get them on board about like what it was, what the revelation was, and all this, until they conquered Jerusalem and then go into Egypt. So yeah, it's the complete antithesis of the spread of Christianity. Like it's completely opposite. Where with the spread by the will of God, and you have people who martyred them, and you have Roman soldiers being converted. You have all these people being converted. Like Father said, how would you get the attention of a world leader now? I think it's very. I will say one more thing, when you were talking about that, why couldn't that happen today? I'm not saying it can't, because with God all things are possible. But the Bible says that Jesus came in the fullness of time, at the right time. That's another proof. It's the exact right time. A couple hundred years earlier doesn't work. A couple hundred years later doesn't work as much. You also have a pagan world that, while they're pagan and can be very brutal, they also love and care about philosophy. They also are traditional family units. They also, things like that, which that's a seedbed for Christianity. Like that was the right time. Roman, they talk about the Romans already built all the roads, so you just walk on these roads, go like that. It's just.
Well, not to push back on that, but does that take away from the effect of how motivated those those 12 were, having spent?
No, I don't think so at all, because they're in constant danger of death.
Mhm.
Like it's constant danger of death from Jews. So all the beginning, they're all Jews. The Sanhedrin wants them dead. Caiaphas, the same one who sentenced Jesus or turned Jesus over to Pilate, is the same one who sent Paul out with this letter to kill Christians. What I'm saying is God it was the right time. The groundwork was perfect. You try to spread it now, we can do it, but this is such a sewer of a culture, and it's so irreligious. Those were religious peoples. I mean, they were ready to hear about the God of Abraham and about his son Jesus. So I think that
so asking,
Did any of you ever hear of Will Durant?
isn't he a historian?
He is. He wrote The History of Civilization, and I think it's about 11 volumes. I grew up with that. My father had it on his bookshelf the time I was a kid. I haven't read all volumes, but he has a very fascinating take on history. And volume 3 is called Caesar and Christ. And it gives a wonderful, wonderful historical perspective. Will Durant, Durant. If you could ever come across, it goes, first volume is our Eastern heritage, then the life of Greece, then Caesar and Christ, then the age of faith, and then the Renaissance, the Reformation, the age of reason, the age of Louis XIV, the age of Voltaire, Rousseau and Revolution, and the age of Napoleon. Excellent, excellent. But I highly recommend Caesar and Christ and the Age of Faith, volume 3 and 4. Because it gives a wonderful, wonderful filling in of history of everything that's been happening. So if you can get your hands on a volume somehow, I would recommend it. I think I have it.
I come across those frequently. So
I gave my set to my brother, my younger brother. Yeah, that's a book that I want to re-look at now. Now that because of this discussion, I'm all hyped up about this now. I'm going to be thinking about it.
Story of civilization.
Yeah. And I don't. Why do you think the Gentiles were so amenable to the? I think a bunch of pagans would be less receptive to the Jewish Messiah, than the Jews. But I felt like, especially after the first Council of Jerusalem, which was specifically to address interacting with the Gentiles, right?
Yeah, with circumcision.
Yeah. And it was funny.
Laws.
I heard a funny, not story today, but people just talking about like what probably not half the reason, but probably one of the reasons why it was prompted was like they're making such great headway on spreading the good news, and you got to do this, forgiveness for your sins. But you got to do this one little thing when you're done, and they're like, nope, and they're probably losing it right when the sales pitch was almost nailed. But have they done demographic studies about, I guess and I don't know how you would even study that, but maybe just, I don't know how to, do you know, Father Coons, if, I guess whether there were more Jews or more Gentiles that were converted in those earlier years?
I really don't know, but I have a feeling, the Gentiles really took off.
Yeah.
So St. Paul is the apostle of the Gentiles, and those communities that were founded by him probably had both Jews and Gentiles. But the Gentiles.
Do you think that was because Paul was such a great communicator, or?
Yeah, they're clearly something about him that goes beyond his letters. Something about the person. His letters only contain is just a part of, a part of him. Do you know what I mean? Like I can lay on a bed and wrinkle the sheets, but that's not going to be evidence of who Thomas Coons is, right? It might say Thomas Coons was laid on that bed, and it obviously lays on his side because do you know what I mean? So the St. Paul, he's writing this letter to that community, this letter here. And he's expressing a lot of words, certainly more than sheets and wrinkled sheets would, but that's just part of it's only a part of who he is. So there had to be something unbelievably charismatic about this man and his preaching that drew people to him. And when you look, he was the zealous persecutor of the church. There was no one more zealous than him going after these heretic Jews called Christians and dragging them before the leaders to have them stone them to death. Okay. And then he had that unique conversion experience like no one else. The appearance of Jesus to him didn't just it wasn't just an appearance to say, I'm Jesus, I love you, you are my friends, that kind of thing. That appearance of Jesus made him an apostle of the Catholic Church. But what I was going to say, as far as the Gentiles are concerned, every once a year around this time, I always watch the 10 Commandments. And something struck me in, the depiction of the slaves in Egypt. All the pagan religions had their priests and priestesses. And it was all the ordinary, I'm not talking about the slave population. I'm talking about the ordinary citizen of whatever nation it was. They had to tithe and give their best to the priestly class, their grains, their meat, their foods. That's what made all the rulers powerful and wealthy, was the state religion enforcing the taxation of the people, not just the merchant class and trade, but all the people as a civic responsibility and duty had to pay in to the religious system. And the temple granaries, in the 10 Commandments, Moses comes along and he's going to be the nice prince of Egypt. And he says the temple granaries are full. And so he starts opening them up to the slaves, which offended the ruling class. So you can bet your bottom dollar that for century after century, all of these ordinary people who pay into the state religion and can see the wealth and the corruption of the religious class and the priestly class, they were ready for a different message. They were ready to hear something new that didn't have to do with them paying a corrupt leader. That's my opinion.
What do you know about that? And this is my poor preparation. What do you know about daily religious pagan life in Rome?
I couldn't say anything about that, but
well, I'm just curious
if you did not participate in the required, whatever they were, this history book by Will Durant would probably go into that. But if you did not participate in the pagan rites as the citizen, you were considered treasonous, because assuaging the deities was a civic duty in order to maintain civil harmony and order. That's what they thought.
All right, I have a follow-up question. but this is something that's not bothered me for a while, but when Paul and Peter and everybody else were going into virgin territory, what would they, and I guess this is something that current day missionaries have to deal with as well, or when we first, landed on Japan and founded churches there. How does that first conversation go? I didn't, they don't have podcasts and Brad the way that I did. What do you, if you walked into a random Italian village to spread the good news, I guess what would, maybe, I don't know.
What was the movie? I really don't, I can't answer that because I never did it, but what was the movie with Gregory Peck? The Keys of the Kingdom? Keys of the Kingdom? Missionary to China. And that's what he did. He moves into a Chinese village. Have you ever seen that movie?
I'm going to now.
Classic. It's a classic. Gregory Peck.
What was it called?
Kingdom, Keys to the Kingdom. Let me just check that.
Well, if it was an Italian village, you have to show up with pasta. But not from the Olive Garden.
Because I could see a new
Yeah, it's
know.
called The Keys of the Kingdom. It was made in 1944.
Okay.
Fascinating movie. And he's dealing with one of the local shoguns, and there used to be a phrase called rice Christianity. Have you ever heard that term?
Yep.
Rice Christianity. Anybody will become a Christian if you give them rice in order to fill their bellies. Okay, so it's kind of a derogatory term, a phrase, in the sense that we use rice to convert them.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking of a couple of things, but you said if you read Paul's letters, read Acts, and then you look through. Now he went around, if we know he founded churches. It doesn't seem like there weren't, in the beginning, there were not mass conversions. He would find a select few, and it's, for the most part, it seems like. So that he was stoned a number of times, thrown into prison. He goes to Athens and kind of strikes out in Athens when he goes there.
Mm-hmm.
According to the traditions of Saint Dionysius the Areopagite becomes the bishop at first. And you're like, well, why? What was the key? I think one, just will. I'm going to keep doing this. Like Paul says, I've been shipwrecked, I've been stoned many times. This, and he was bit by a snake, almost died. Later, then he sets the groundwork. During the apostolic age, it's spreading and spreading. What really is like the fire, I think, what really is the gasoline on the fire is the witness of the martyrs. Mm-hmm. After that. So when the persecution kicked in, like Nero kicks in the 60s, Peter and Paul are martyred, and then people are seeing, because what's the famous quote? See how they love each other. Like he said, if like you said, what's the difference? He was talking about the priests taxing and this and that. We have pagan records where people would go to the Christian, the pagan, like if a plague hit, the pagans were out of town. The priesthood was out of town. They wouldn't help you out. The Christians, no matter if you were pagan or Christian or what, or Jew, they would care for you. They would feed you. So it was a witness of charity and a witness of blood, really spread. So I think sometimes we think Paul had it easy, like he moved around and Paul, and they're like flocking to him. Mm-hmm. He beat up a bunch of times. They didn't understand what was going on, so it takes time. I think it was, what I mean when I say that the ground was ripe, the fear, like going all over the place here, but Christ's parable of the seeds, the sower, it was the right time to sow those seeds. The ground was ready. Like you can even think of like people have said with the sower and the seeds is really all of human history or history since Christ. Like when we live in a time now where the soil is more rocky and people, the birds are coming and eating it. I also think that's that couple of things I was thinking of because this is very interesting. You were like, what paganism. So by the time Paul and the apostles, by the time they get to Rome, Paul's in Rome, Peter's in Rome. Paganism then was different than it was like 100 years or two before when in the early days of the Republic or in the Kingdom of Rome. So Romans were in the early days, they were kind of savage. They could be savage in warfare. That's how they built their kingdom and then an empire. But they always had household gods, gods of the hearth, gods of the field, very intimate relationship. When it becomes an empire, then you see these big blood, and it's Caesar is the emperor, and you got to sacrifice to him. I think when they come around and preach Jesus Christ, him crucified, and in the Theotokos, and this there's a familial feel to the God of Abraham and the family of Abraham. I think that appeals to those people. You can't relate to Jupiter. You can't relate to Jupiter. You can't relate to Mars. You can't relate to the emperor. That's one. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's that there. And then Greek philosophy being in place certainly really helped once Christians embraced that. So by the time you see St. John the Evangelist is using Greek philosophical language, and I think that helps. Another one I wanted to, the point you brought up before, and I'll be quiet. You were talking about Gentiles versus Jews. I think it's interesting that certainly all the early Christians were Jews, and then they began. Cornelius is the first Gentile convert, and then they begin to spread. What happens in 70 AD? You have the destruction of the temple. What happened then too? You have all the other Jewish sects, religious sects are eliminated pretty much, except who? The Pharisees, the traditional enemies of Jesus. So Judaism becomes rabbinical Judaism, and it becomes defined by we're not Christians. Whereas I think I've heard other people at this theory that part of what happened to the Sadducees or other sects, the Essenes, and they became Christians. They were more maybe not Sadducees as much, but these other sects were more. They were converted. You talked about the 3,000 that were converted. Mm-hmm. So then after 70 AD, so certainly by the time John writes his gospel, when John uses the word Jew, it's in a negative context. It's negative. They did this for fear of the Jews. The parents wouldn't speak out because they were afraid to be kicked out of the synagogue by the Jews for fear of the Jews. Jesus calls them the seed of Satan, Jews. So then you see the antithesis is already in place. So I think that had a lot to do with it too. Paul talks about that too. It's a mystery why God would. It's all for us Gentiles. Before our conversion, it's a grace. The sin and rejection of Jesus by the Jews, God turned into a grace for us so that we could be welcomed into the covenant. Paul talks about that mystery so that at the end, they'll come back in. So we're the wild, talks about the wild shoot that's grafted into the olive tree. So anyway, that's some different thoughts.
That was a good topic.
Yeah. Well, it's always the reason I wanted to talk about it is because it's I feel like my brain got there before my heart did, and it's and anywho, getting through Acts and kind of just having the chronology and then actually doing research about how it's it's everything in it is historical. There's an accurate as far as the geography and the names and the towns and everything's it's a true history. And so if you've got this historical event and then you've got these wonderful things happening within that true history, you don't find that anywhere else in in history. And so anyway, that's what sold me initially to get my, paved the way for my heart to get in. So.
Reed, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Is there a particular verse that really stands out to you through Acts?
The bravery of Stephen's very, and him through his martyrdom, kind of just being such a good speaker and getting and just being brave in the face of the mob was, I couldn't quote it, but those passages always stuck with me. So that particular, so maybe not not a particular quote or verse, but that story itself is very.
Right.
And then as I keep learning from Brad and keep learning about the church, the concept of the first council, and talking about something that initially I thought was kind of irrelevant, and now I realize that council set the stage for everything up at that. You can draw a direct line from Vatican II to 80, what was it, 30, 80, 60 or whatever when the Jerusalem Council was, and yeah. So anyway, the martyrdom of Stephen would probably be. But yeah, and I really want to go to where do they first get shipwrecked? Malta? Is that yeah, I want to I was listening to a podcast a few weeks back about the siege of Malta, and it was actually on a Catholic Catholic radio station. It's like very grainy. It's like some speech given in the 70s or whatever. But the guy giving the speech says that when he was writing his book on the siege of Malta, how every single bay or inlet that he visited there, every single one claims to be where they shipwrecked. And so they've got, it's just in the entire island of Malta. But anyhow. So.
They should make like an Indiana Jones movie where it's like the worst little, like dopiest little inlet is the one like that he has to.
And it actually was it. But yeah, I mean, just part of what I did an exceptionally terrible job describing at the beginning was, it's like, what if that shipwreck hadn't shipwrecked and just sank? What if
We'd all be in hell.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Like what if Paul didn't get out of prison initially? What if what if the council didn't put together a solution that was made Christianity friendly to Gentiles? Like all of those things had to be perfect, and Acts just describes that, and that's terrifying. Going back to evolution from your talk about how there's they've identified some genetic markers to where, like, there's a time period, if you buy the original, like let's just say the secular timeline, there's a time period where, like, on all of Earth there was like 10,000 people, on planet because of some weird atmospheric event or something like that. And just the idea, like, just imagine the weight on their shoulders. They wouldn't know. They were, but that's well, but like just the idea that like billions and billions of people in the entire world order of today, and the weight of heaven on your shoulders, going out and preaching. Yeah, I guess I'd be a pretty good evangelist if I knew that was. Oh no, I'd probably be terrible. I'd be terrible at it. I could have Jesus giving me a pep talk and saying, "All right, go out and read. You get Antioch," And
It's like that thing, like hard times create hard men, hard men create soft times. So, and less is more. I mean, a lot of times, we want everyone to come into the church, but we want everyone, and we want everyone to come to church, but sometimes like the more you expand, sometimes you got to deal with that bloat. You got a lot of dead weight. That was a fast and lean ship. Like there's no messing around. They saw Jesus who had risen from the dead, and then the people that heard them believed in it. It was an immediacy. They also didn't have all. I mean, there was distractions, but you have all the distractions you had, stupidity. Like I talked with that time, just little things like when they fasted, they would fast. We're not messing around. It's time to fast. It's stuff like that. Or if you read the martyrdom of, Perpetua and Felicity from the other day, catechumens were willing to die. They're not even baptized yet. They're willing to die for Christ. And we're a little afraid that how many of us would? I mean, there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah. Have you thought about that? Like, that's when so I've been terrified of death, as everybody should be. But I've always kind of thought, like, if I was in a near-death situation, that I'd just get on my knees and pray. Like, and that's like since joining the church, and I like that. It's very comforting, knowing that. So anyway, yeah. If you saw that, and you saw, if you spent time with Jesus, you would watch die, and you spent 40 days with them. Like, yeah, like they if you'd be literally stupid to be scared,
Well, I think you'd be scared, but I know you wouldn't be a coward.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
difference.
Oh, yeah. Pain
Yeah.
sucks, and dying, I'm sure, is not fun. But knowing what's coming, and
Jesus had fear at a certain point, but he was not a coward. It was like a natural will to want to live. That's normal. Then he gave his human will to divine. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Did you ever, I think that, did you ever see, on all these videos that are all over the internet, when something dangerous happens or out of the ordinary, there's an explosion, and you hear, if they don't censor the language with the bleeps, you hear all this blasphemy, cursing and everything. But it leads you to think, if something like that confronted me, like death or danger or a semi truck coming at me on the road, what's going to issue out of my mouth in that moment? An F you, or or am I practiced in what they call pious ejaculations? Okay, and that is prayer. That's one of the important aspects of reasons of prayers, so that at every moment, even when we act instinctually, that we go to the Lord, and not in fear either. With the martyrs, you can't say ahead of time, will I be able to do it? Well, no, none of us can do any of that alone. But God enables us through his grace, actual grace and sacramental grace, to do what is needed to be done. But we have to cooperate in our ordinary living to be open to receive the power of grace that's needed in the moment in order to confront the semi-truck or the martyrdom or something like that. Do you see does that make sense? But yeah, I see this you see it all over the internet, and I'm thinking, my Lord, where did people learn to talk like this?
well,
Where did they learn that to see, something dangerous happen is cause for that what blurts out of them is gutter language. So the importance of prayer, you talk about, would I be able to do this or that, is, I think, highly dependent on the habits of prayer that we develop and the reliance upon God in our daily life. And it's kind of a subconscious awareness that everywhere I'm walking, between the house and the garage and the church and wherever else, someone's looking and counting the hairs on my head
well, and that's
and listening to my thoughts.
That's terrible. Yeah. The well, and that's maybe, so my point being, if you had just seen Jesus and spent time with him, it'd be very easy to have that confidence and faith and be able to communicate with it. And I guess maybe us 2,000 years later, we do have that in the church, his church, and we've got the sacraments and we've got the strongest institution in the history of the world that is physically there for us to be around at all times, where other churches, you might not have that. So that I'm not saying I go to church and immediately have that fire that I'd be able to do what they do, but I imagine that's the purpose of it.
Well, here's another thing I say, don't sell yourself short. As God, all things are possible with God. So rather than say, I don't know that I could, better for you to say, all things are possible with God. So you
convinced me. Catholic speaker, read Pinnell, throw me into an atheist nation. I'm gonna get them. You know, we've got this recorded right now. We're gonna show this video to intro me walking in, and it'll be perfect.
Listen. This is all a hypocrite talking here. Okay, this is the hypocrite par excellence talking, because I have all these same thoughts that you're expressing. Exact same thoughts all my life. I'm 25 years a priest, and easier said than done. Absolutely easier said than done. But you brought up a great discussion this evening. I have to say that, and I love the fact that you look at this book of the Bible as like your favorite. I think that's a real grace to be able to say that. I used to say when I was a kid, I loved reading the book of Leviticus of all things. So I was a real weirdo from a long time ago, because nobody likes. I liked all the laws. Somehow I liked all those laws, and some of them were pretty adult-like for a kid who didn't know any better. Anyway, oh my God, I talk too much.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I should have done, Brad for his thing. He had a perfect 3 pages, perfectly written out, and I should have done that. I thought I could wing it. But hey, the next thing that I host, a couple months from now, next time that it's my turn or whatever, we'll talk economics or something that I'm a little bit more accustomed to talking about. And but thanks for being patient and being
I think that was a great thing, and nice and casual. So thank you.
And I think it's good, you have, I liked how you brought up like the historic element. Like I think you'd also like, there's the guy, I think it's Habermas. I think he talks about a lot about the historical evidence to the resurrection. Like I guess that kind of ties in, what you were talking about with. And so I think that would be a thing you might enjoy, like watching some of his talks, because like that was the thing I enjoyed looking at too, that kind of, bolstered my faith. Also like looking at that historical element to like how early a lot of that stuff really is, like, and that was kind of.
It's been I'm such a bad evangelist. I've literally, so I just got back from hanging out with a bunch of hippie libertarians up in Williamsport, but I've been wearing my faith on my sleeve and all, and I can say Christ is king, and I can get people to come to church with me, but I'm really bad at like sitting there and convincing somebody. But there actually is a guy that I'd met that has worked his way through Aristotle and worked his way through. I think I might have actually mentioned this in a text thing, whatever. But anyway, I got to hang out with him and a few other people of like mind. That the history and that direct line and the provability of AD 30 to AD 60 and how that is history right there is something that they can, that's very logical for them to work up to that and have that connection to it right there. So that's the history stuff, and what I tried to convey there is probably my best way to reach people that kind of struggle with the same stuff that I did. So. Anywho, you want to, should we
Just wrap her up.
wrap her up?
Yep.
Yeah, Father, you want to lead us in a prayer,
Anyone have a preference for a prayer this evening?
the blessing?
Saint Michael, the archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the other evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. And may Almighty God bless all of you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Have a good night, everyone. Nice seeing you.
Right.
And what's my cousin Kevin doing in Florida?
I
In a
know.
restaurant.
What do you think?
Is it
Is he on
Disney?
vacation the first week of Lent?
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about
I think I owe him a text about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Have a good night, guys.
Night, guys.
Right.
I think we're still recording.
Round 2. The priest is gone.
Where's it? Guys, we're still recording though. We're still on film.
Push. All right, guys, I'm gonna hit here. That we get the delay.
Good night.